In this video, we will dive into the movie The Mummy Tomb of the Dragon Empire. We will take a closer look at the storyline, provide a clear plot summary, and explore the cast and characters. In addition, we will discuss the film production detail and analyze its box office performance. Finally, we will share reviews along with our personal reactions. So, let's get started. When we begin talking about the Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Empire, it's important to slow down for a moment and understand why this film, even with its mixed reception, is still worth discussing. This is not just another action movie, it represents a turning point in a well known adventure franchise. First, let's consider the genre. This film sits at the intersection of action, fantasy, and adventure. It follows the tradition established by the earlier entries in The Mummy, blending fast paced action with supernatural mythology. However, unlike its predecessors, which were deeply rooted in Egyptian lore, this installment boldly shifts to Chinese mythology. That change alone makes it an interesting case study. It shows how a franchise try to evolve, experimenting with new culture backdrop while maintaining its core identity. An ancient curses, resurrected ruler, and a race against time. Now turning to the director Rob Cohen. Cohen is known for directing high energy, visually driven films like The Fast and the Furious. His style leans heavily into spectacle, large action sequence, dramatic visual, and a focus on entertainment over spectral storytelling. When he stepped into the Mummy franchise, he brought that same sensibility. You can feel it throughout the film. The action is bigger, louder, and more exaggerated. Massive CGI battles, shape shifting villains, and explosive set pieces dominate the screen. But this brings us to an important discussion about production style compared to earlier films directed by Stephen Sommers. This movie feels different. Sommers had a lighter, more playful tone, blending humor with adventure in a way that felt almost nostalgic, like a tribute to classic pulp adventure stories. In contrast, Rob Cohen's approach is more modern and effects driven. The film relies heavily on CGI, especially in the portrayal of the Dragon Emperor and his supernatural power. This shift in production style is exactly why this movie is worth analyzing. It reflects a broader trend in Hollywood during the late 2000s, a growing dependence on digital effects to create spectacle. While the visuals are ambitious, they sometimes overshadow character development and emotional depth. For some viewers, this makes the film feels less personal and more like a visual showcase. At the same time, we should not overlook the film's ambition. Moving the story to China introduced new visual elements, ancient palaces, snowing mountain, and the iconic terracotta army. These settings give the movie a distinct identity, separating it from the desert landscape of earlier films. The filmmakers clearly wanted to expand the universe, not just repeat the same formula. Another reason this movie deserves discussion is how it handles franchise evaluation. By the time a series reaches its third installment, it faces a challenge: stay the same and risk becoming repetitive, or change and risk alienating fan. The film chooses change. Whether that change succeed or not is open to debate, but the attempt itself is significant. So, if we warm up this discussion, think of this movie not just a standalone story but an experiment. It is a blend of bold adventure tradition and modern blockbuster filmmaking. It may not capture the same magic as its predecessor, but it offers something different: a new cultural lens, a new directorial style, and a new approach to spectacle. When analyzing the production budget of the film, it becomes clear that the film was designed as a large scale international blockbuster with Financial planning reflecting both ambition and risk. The estimated production cost of the film is generally reported to be around 150 million dollars, placing it firmly within the category of high budget blockbuster action adventure film of the late 2000s. To understand this figure, it had to break down how such a budget is typically allocated across major production areas. A significant portion of the cost was directed toward visual effects. Unlike earlier entries in The Mummy, this installment relied heavily on computer generated imagery to bring the dragon emperor's supernatural abilities to life. Shape shifting transformation, large scale battles involving terracotta warrior, and environmental effects such as avalanches and collapsing structure require extensive digital work. During this period, CGI technology was advancing rapidly, but it was also expensive, especially for films aiming at blockbuster level spectacle. Another major component of the budget was location and set design. The film shifted its setting from Egypt to China, which required the creation of entirely new visual environment. This included elaborate set represented in ancient Chinese palaces, tombs, and mountainous landscape. Even when filming took place in controlled environment, these sets had to convincingly replicate historical and cultural detail, adding to the cost. Additionally, some scenes were shot in location which increased expenses related to travel, logistical, and coordination. The cast and talent cost also contribute to the overall budget, so they were not primarily expense compared to visual effects. The return of Braden Fraser as a lead character ensured continuity for the franchise, while internationally recognized actors like Jet Li and Michael Yeoh added global appeal. Hiring such talent not only increased upfront cost but also supported the film marketing strategy, particularly in Asian market. From a production management perspective, the film reflects the influence of director Rob Cohen, whose style emphasized large-scale action and visual intensity. This approach typically requires higher spending on stunt coordination, especially effects integration and post-production work. Compared to the earlier films directed by Stephen Sommer, this installment shows a noticeable shift toward a more effect-driven production model which is inherently more expensive. When placed in context with similar film of its era, the $145 million budget appeared consistent with the other action adventure franchises. For example, The Mummy Return had a lower budget of approximately $98 million, reflecting both inflation and the increased reliance on digital effects by 2008. Similarly, films like Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull operated with even larger budget, reportedly around $185 million, highlighting the competitive scale of blockbuster filmmaking at the time. This comparison shows that the film was positioned as a mid to high tier blockbuster rather than the most expensive film of its year. Its budget was sufficient to deliver spectacle but still constrained enough to require careful allocation of resources. The emphasis on visual effects suggests that producers prioritize immediate visual impact and global market appeal over more modest character-driven storytelling investment. The film production effect reflect a strategic attempt to expand the franchise through scale, technology, and international influence. The allocation of funds towards CGI, set design, and globally recognized actors demonstrate a clear focus on spectacle and market reach. While this approach aligned with industry trend of the late 2000s, it also highlights the financial balancing act involved in sustaining a long-running franchise in an increasingly competitive blockbuster landscape. When examining the genre and the overall mood of the film, it becomes clear that the film is built as a hybrid of action, fantasy, and adventure with a strong emphasis on spectacle. This combination defines not only how the film is structured but also how it feels moment to moment. At its core, the film belongs to the action adventure genre, a category known for fast pacing, physical stake, and constant movement. From a stylistic perspective, the film rarely allows stillness to settle in. Instead, it maintains a forward driving rhythm where scenes are constructed to keep the viewers engaged through motions, visual intensity, and escalating scale. This pacing reflects a deliberate choice to prioritize momentum over reflection, aligned with blockbuster filmmaking trend of the late 2000s. Layer on top of this is a strong fantasy element which shaped the film's atmosphere. The presence of supernatural forces, ancient myth, and larger than life visual contrast create a world that feels heightened rather than realistic. The environment is not meant to minor reality, instead, it invites the audience into a stylized universe where the impossible is normalized. This contributes to a sense of wonder but also distance the film from grounded emotional realism. In terms of mood, the film leans heavily toward excitement and intensity. The tone is energetic and often exaggerated, driven by a desire to entertain through spectacle. There is a consistent sense of urgency in the atmosphere, reinforced by rapid editing, dynamic camera movement, and large scale visual effect. Even quieter moments tend to carry an underlying tension, as if the film is always preparing for the next burst of action. However, the mood is not purely serious like other entries in The Mummy. The film incorporates elements of light, humor, and pure playful dialogue. These moments are designed to balance the intensity, preventing the tone from becoming overly dark or oppressive. That said, compared to earlier film in the series, the humor feels less central and more intermittent, resulting in a tone that is slightly more focused on action than charm. The visual style plays a significant role in shaping the film's mood. Under the direction of Rob Cohen, the film adopts a glossy, effect driven aesthetic, bright contrast, dramatic lighting, and expansive digital environment contribute to a sense of scale and grandeur. The reliance on CGI is particularly noticeable, giving the film a polished but sometimes artificial look. This stylistic choice enhances the fantasy element but can also create a sense of detachment as the visuals occasionally feel more constructed than organic. Another important aspect of the film atmosphere is its global and cultural tone. The shift in setting introduces a different visual and thematic palette, influence everything from costume design to architecture style. This adds a layer of exoticism and visual diversity which enriches the overall mood by offering something distinct from typical western eccentric adventure film. The atmosphere becomes more varied, blending traditional adventure energy with culturally inspired imagery. From a pacing standpoint, the film follows a high intensity structure with minimal downtime between major sequences. This creates a viewing experience that feels continuous and immersive, but it can also limit opportunities for emotional depth or character driven moment. The emphasis remains on external action rather than internal reflection. In conclusion, the film presents a genre blend that prioritizes action and fantasy, supported by a fast paced and visually driven style. Its mood is energetic, adventurous, and spectral, focused with occasional touches of humor to maintain balance. While it may sacrifice subtlety in favor of scale, it succeeds in creating a dynamic and engaging atmosphere that reflects the expectation of a modern blockbuster. When approaching the movie, audience expectation play a major role in shaping the viewing experience. This is not a film that exists in isolation. It carries the weight of a recognizable franchise, established tone, and loyal fan base. As a result, different group of viewers combine into the film with very different mindset, and those expectations influence how the movie is received. First, consider viewer demographic. The primary audience for this film tend to be fans of action adventure cinema, particularly those who grew up watching earlier entries in The Mummy. These viewers often expect a continuation of the same spirit, fast paced storytelling, charismatic performance, and a balance between thrill and humor. There is also a younger demographic, including teenager and casual viewer, which may be drawn more by spectacle than by continuity. For them, expectations are usually centered on visual excitement, large scale action, and entering set pieces rather than narrative depth. At the same time, there is a segment of the franchise that approaches the film with a more critical eye. Those who are familiar with the franchise earlier tone and are curious about how it evolves. These viewers often expect consistency in character dynamic, emotional tone, and storytelling style. When a film belongs to a well-known series, audience rarely come in neutral. They carry memories, comparison, and personal preferences with them. Moving to anticipated themes, audience generally expect a mix of ancient mythology, supernatural elements, and adventurous exploration. The Mummy brand itself suggests a world where history and fantasy collide, where initial legends come alive in dramatic and often dangerous ways. Viewers anticipate a sense of mystery, discovery, and confrontation with powerful forces beyond human control. Even without knowing specifics, there is an expectation of encountering a mythological framework that feels grand and imaginative. There is also an expectation of light-hearted adventure. Unlike darker or more serious fantasy film, this franchise traditionally carries a tone that blends action with humor. Audience often expect moments of wit, playful banter, and the sense of fun woven into the larger spectacle. This expectation is important because it shapes how viewers interrupt the tone too serious and it may feel disconnected from the franchise identity too comedic and it may lose its sense of scale. For genre fans, particularly those who enjoy fantasy action, hybrid expectations are even more specific. Those viewers typically look for well executed visual effects, creative world building, memorable action sequence. They expect the film to deliver a sense of immersion, transporting them into a visually rich and imaginative environment. Fans of this genre are often more forgiving of narrative simplicity as long as the film succeeds in delivering excitement of the spectacle. However, expectation can also become a double edged sword because earlier film in the franchise establish a certain tone and style. Audience may expect a similar emotional connection or narrative charm. Any noticeable shift, whether in visual style, pacing, or overall tone, can lead to mixed reaction. Some viewers may appreciate the attempt to refresh the formula, where others may feel that it's too far from what made the earlier films enjoyable. Another important factor is the expectation of the scale. By the time a franchise reaches its third installment, audience generally expect something bigger, larger than setting, more elaborate visuals, and higher stakes. This creates pressure on the film to deliver a bigger experience, even if that comes at the expense of intimacy or character focus. For many viewers, the success of the film is tied to how well it meets these expectations of escalation. In addition, modern audience, especially those familiar with blockbuster trend, often expect a high level of technical polish, Smooth visual effects, dynamic cinematography, and immersive sound design are no longer optional. They are the part of the baseline expectation. Any perceived weakness in these areas can stand out more clearly because viewers are accustomed to high production standards. Ultimately, audience expectation for the films are shaped by a combination of franchise loyalty, genre familiarity, and blockbuster standards. Some viewers come looking for nostalgia and continuity, others for spectacle and entertainment, and still others for innovation within a familiar framework. This differing expectation create a wide range of reactions, making the film an interesting example of how audience mindset can influence overall perception. Before even pressing play, the audience has already formed an idea of what the film should be and whether the movie align with that idea or challenges it often determines how it is ultimately expressed. When considering the target audience of the film, it becomes clear that the film is designed primarily from a mainstream audience that enjoys high energy entertainment rather than spectacular, deeply introspective storytelling. The movie is built to attract viewers who are looking for excitement, visual spectacle, and a sense of adventure, rather than those seeking complex narrative or emotional depth. In terms of age group, the film is more suitable for teenagers and adults, generally those aged 13 and above. Younger viewers may still find part of it entertaining, but the pacing, intensity, and scale of action are better appreciated by a slightly more mature audience. Teenagers, in particularly, are a central target group because they are often drawn to fast moving, visually stimulating content. Adults also form a significant portion of the audience, especially those who are already familiar with the mummy and interested in continuing that thematic experience. This combination of younger and older viewers help the film maintain a broad appeal across generations. From an interest perspective, the movie is clearly aimed at individuals who enjoy large scale action and cinematic spectacle. These viewers are typically attracted to films that emphasize movement, intensity, and visual excitement. They are likely to appreciate dramatic effects, elaborate set pieces, and high stakes sequences that keep the energy level consistently high. The film caters to those who watch movies as a form of escapism, offering an experience that feels bigger than reality and filled with imaginative elements. Viewers who enjoy fantasy settings, especially those inspired by ancient myth and legendary themes, are also the part of the intended audience. Another important group include fans who appreciate visually rich environment and culturally inspired aesthetic. The film design and stylistic choices introduce a setting that feel different from typical western focus action films, which can attract viewers interested in global influence and diverse cinematic visual. This makes the movie appealing not to domestic audience but also to international viewers who enjoy seeing a variety of cultural elements represented on screen. When it comes to genre preferences, the film is strongly targeted at fans of action, fantasy, and adventure. These viewers expect a blend of physical excitement and imaginative adventure storytelling, where realism is less important than entertainment value. They are comfortable with exaggerated scenarios, supernatural elements, and fast paced sequences that prioritize thrill over logic. For this audience, the enjoyment comes from the overall experience rather than detailed storytelling or character exploration. At the same time, the film is less suited for viewers who prefer slower paced, character driven dramas or films that focus heavily on emotional depth and realism. Those who look for subtitle performance, clear narrative, or thought provoking themes may find this type of movie less engaging. The emphasis here is clearly on action and spectacle, which define both its strength and its limitation. At the same time, the film is less suited for viewers who prefer slower paced, character driven dramas or films that focus heavily on emotional depth and realism. Those who look for subtitle performances, layered narrative, or thought provoking themes may find this type of movie less engaging. The emphasis here is clearly on action and spectacle, which define both its strength and its limitation. The target audience for this movie consists of viewers who enjoy energetic, visually driven entertainment, particularly teenagers and adults with a preferences for action, adventure, and fantasy genre. It is made for those who want to be entertained, immersed, and visually impressed, rather than those seeking a quiet or deeply reflective cinematic experience. When considering the emotional experience offered by the film of the Dragon Empire, it's important to understand that the film is designed to deliver a specific kind of feeling, one centered on excitement, stimulation, and escapism, rather than deep emotional reflection. The movie aimed to keep the viewer engaged through constant sensory input, shaping an experience that is energetic and outwardly driven. In terms of mood, the film maintains a consistently intense and adventurous atmosphere from beginning to end. The emotional tone leans toward urgency and momentum. There is a sense that something is always happening or about to happen, which create a feeling of anticipation in the viewer. This is not a calm or slow paced experience. Instead, it is built to keep the audience alert and mentally engaged. The mood often feel heightened, almost exaggerated, as the film prioritizes spectacle and movement over quiet or introspective moments. At the same time, the movie incorporates a layer of lightness to prevent the intensity from becoming overwhelming. There is an undercurrent of fun woven into the experience which help balance the overall tone. This creates a blend of tension and entertainment where the viewers can feel excitement without being emotionally burdened. The film does not aim to create heaviness or emotional strain. Instead, it encourages a more relaxed, enjoyment focused response. Looking at the themes, the emotional experience is shaped by ideas commonly associated with adventure and fantasy. These include the thrill of discovery, the confrontation with powerful forces, and the sense of facing something larger than oneself. These themes are not explored in a deeply philosophical way but are presented in a straightforward, accessible manner that support the film's primary goal of entertainment. The emotional response they generate is more immediate than reflective. Viewers are meant to feel excitement, curiosity, and suspense in the moment rather than contemplate deeper meaning afterward. Another thematic element influencing the emotional tone is the concept of scale. The film consistently aimed to make everything feel bigger, larger in environment, more intense action, and more dramatic visual moment. This creates a sense of awe, even if it is temporary. The emotional impact here comes from being visually and mentally impressed rather than emotionally moved in a traditional sense. It is about experiencing something grand and visually overwhelming. The intended impact of the film is therefore quite clear. It seeks to entertain through stimulation. The audience is meant to feel energized during the viewing experience, carried along by the film pace and visual style. It is the kind of movie that encourages viewer to sit back and enjoy the ride rather than analyze or emotionally invest at a deep level. This make it particularly effective as a form of escapism, offering a temporary break from reality through a world that is more intense and visually dynamic. However, this approach also means that the emotional experience may feel somewhat surface level for certain viewers. Those who prefer films that build strong emotional connection or explore complex inner struggle may find the experience less satisfying. The movie does not aim to evoke strong feeling such as sadness, empathy, or introspection. Instead, it focuses on more immediate and accessible emotions like excitement, tension, and amusement. There is also a sense of familiarity in the emotional tone, especially for those who are acquainted with the mummy. The film attempts to recreate a recognizable feeling associated with adventure cinema, a mix of danger and fun, where the stakes feel high but the experience remain enjoyable. The narrative implies that story is never fully truly finished. It remains active, influencing the present in way that can't be ignored. This idea resonates with the broader structure of the mummy, where the past consistently resurfaces and demand to be addressed. The message of the film can also be interpreted through the lens of balance between human desire and natural order. It suggests that there is an inherent structure to existence, whether understood as fate, nature, or cosmic balance, that resists extreme disruption. When individuals attempt to elevate themselves beyond this structure, they create instability. The restoration of balance, therefore, becomes an inevitable outcome, not necessarily as a moral judgment, but as a natural correction. This perspective aligns with many traditional myths where the universe operates according to principles that ultimately overrides individuals with. Additionally, the films engage with the idea of identity shaped by power. In abstract terms, power is not neutral, it transforms those who seek it. The story concept implies that the pursuit of absolute authority can lead to a loss of humanity as identity becomes increasingly defined by control and dominance rather than connection or limitation. This transformation is not presented as a sudden change but as a gradual shift where the individuals becomes consumed by the very force they sought to command. The theme raises question about whether power reveals true identity or distorted beyond recognition. There is also an undercurrent of resistance and opposition, which function as a counterbalance to ambition. In mythic storytelling, extreme forces are often met with equally determined resistance, creating a dynamic interplay between opposing energies. This opposition is not just physical but symbolic. It represents the idea that no force, no matter how powerful, exists without a counter force. This duality reinforces the concept of balance, suggested that every action generates a response that works to restore equilibrium. From a broader perspective, the film's core idea can be seen as a part of a larger tradition of mythological storytelling, where narrative are less about specific events and more about illustrating universal truth. These stories often use exaggerated elements, immense power, supernatural forces, and dramatic conflict to explore fundamental questions about human nature. In this context, the films becomes a moderate expression of an ancient storytelling pattern using contemporary thematic technique to convey ideas that have existed for centuries. Ultimately, the story concept of the film is rooted in the interplay between ambition, power, and consequence. It represents a world where the pursuit of absolute control leads to imbalance, where the past continues to influence the present, and where the restoration of order is an unavoidable process. The film message is not delivered through subtitle interception but through broad mythic symbolism, inviting the audience to engage with these ideas on an intuitive rather than analytical level. In this way, the movie functions as both entertainment and allegory. Beneath its surface of action spectacle lies a conceptual framework that reflects enduring human concern, the desire to transcend limit, the consequence of that desire, and an ongoing search for balance in a world shaped by both ambition and restraint. At the heart of the movie lies a central conflict that operates on both a symbolic and conceptual level. Rather than being limited to a simple opposition between forces, it reflects a deeper struggle rooted in more dilemmas, human limitation, and the tension between opposing world view. This conflict is not just external, it represents a clash of ideas about power, control, and the natural order of existence. One of the prominent aspects of this conflict is the moral dilemma surrounding power. In abstract terms, the film explores what happens when power is pursued without ethical boundaries. The desire to command, dominate, and extend influence beyond natural limits create a fundamental tension. On one side lies the belief that power can and should be absolute, that control over lifetime or existence itself is achievable and justified. On the other side is the recognition that such ambition comes with consequences, raises the question of whether any individual has the right to exceed those limits. This dilemma is not resolved easily. Instead, it remains a central source of tension, forcing a confrontation between ambition and responsibility. Closely connected to this is the challenge of confronting forces that exceed human understanding. The conflict suggests that there are elements within the world that can't be easily controlled or fully comprehended. This creates a sense of vulnerability as individuals are placed in opposition to something far greater than themselves. The challenge is not only physical but philosophical. How does one respond when faced with a force that defines logic, scale, and expectation? This uncertainty generates a persistent tension as the boundaries between what is possible and what is impossible begin to blur. Another layer of the central conflict involves the struggle between preservation and disruption. On one side is the desire to maintain balance, stability, and continuity. On the other hand is the impulse to disrupt, reshape, or dominate. These opposing drives create a dynamic tension that runs throughout the life's conceptual framework. The conflict suggests that stability is fragile, constantly at the risk of being overturned by forces driven by ambition or desire. At the same time, it raises the question of whether maintaining balance requires resistance, intervention, or sacrifice. The film also engages with the idea of internal versus external conflict. While much of the tension appears outwardly as a struggle between opposing forces, it is rooted in deeper internal question about identity and purpose. The pursuit of power often reflects an internal need to overcome limitation, to assert control, or to define oneself. This creates a dual layer conflict where the external struggle mirrors an internal one. The tension rises not just from what is happening but from why it is happening and what is revealed about the nature of human desire. In addition, there is a significant emphasis on the conflict between past and present. The narrative framework suggests that the past is not something that can be felt behind. Instead, it continues to exert influence over the present. This creates a tension between what has already been set in emotion but what can still be changed. The challenge lies in navigating the consequence of previous action while attempting to assert control over the current moment. This interplay between time period reinforces the idea that history is active rather than static, shaping the condition of the present in unavoidable ways. The central conflict also reflects a clash between individual will and collective impact. The pursuit of power or control is often driven by individual ambition, yet its consequences extend far beyond the individuals. This creates a moral tension that action of one can affect many, raises question about responsibility and accountability. The conflict highlights the imbalance that occurs when personal desire override broader consideration, emphasizing the ripple effect that follows such discussions. Another important dimension is the tension between order and chaos. The film presents a world where order is constantly threatened by force that introduce unpredictability and disruption. The tension is not simply about maintaining control, but about understanding the nature of balance itself. Too much order can become rigid and oppressive, while too much chaos leads to instability and uncertainty. The central conflict exists within this delicate balance where opposing forces continuously pushed against each other. Furthermore, the conflict can be seen as a part of a larger thematic structure shared by the mummy, wherein ancient forces and modern perspective collide. This creates a tension between different ways of understanding the world, one rooted in myth, tradition, and timeless power, and the other grounded in contemporary reasoning and human limitation. The interaction between these perspectives adds complexity to the conflict as neither side fully negates the other. Ultimately, the central conflict of the film is defined by its layered nature. It is not confined to a single struggle, but instead emerges from multiple overlapping tensions, moral, philosophical, and existential. It challenges ideas about the limit of power, the consequence of ambition, and the fragile balance between opposing forces. In this way, the conflict becomes more than just a driving force for a nation, it becomes a framework for exploring fundamental questions about control, responsibility, and the nature of existence. It is depth beneath the surface of spectacle that gives the film its underlying conceptual strength, even as it presents itself primarily as a high energy, visually driven experience. The film thematic structure operates beneath its spectral, offering a range of ideas that connect ethical question, emotional undercurrent, and cultural influences. While the film presents itself as a fast-paced action adventure, its foundation is built on themes that reflect long-standing storytelling tradition, particularly those rooted in myth and human ambition. One of the most prominent ethical questions explored in the film is the idea of the limit of power. The narrative framework raises a fundamental concern: should power have boundaries, and what happens when these boundaries are ignored? This is not presented as simple moral judgment but as an ongoing tension. The pursuit of dominance, control, or immorality is portrayed as both alluring and dangerous. It forces the audience to consider whether the desire for ultimate authority is inherently flawed or whether it becomes problematic only when it disrupts a natural balance. The ethical dilemmas lie in the contrast between ambition and responsibility, how far one should go in seeking control and at what cost. Closely related to this is the theme of consequence and accountability. Actions within the film's conceptual frameworks are not isolated, they echo across time and affect others in significant ways. This introduces the idea that choices, especially those driven by ambition or desire, carry long-term implications. The ethical questions here revolves around responsibility, not just for immediate outcome, but for the broader impact of one's action. It suggests that power is not just about capability, but about the willingness to bear the consequence that comes with it. From an emotional perspective, the film engages with the theme of connection and distance, particularly in how individuals relate to one another in high pressure environment. Although the film prioritizes action and spectacle, there is an underlying emotional arc centered on trust, cooperation, and need for the unity when facing overwhelming challenges. These emotional threads are not deeply introspective, but they provide a sense of grounded within the larger, more exaggerated narrative world. The idea that strength often comes from collaboration rather than isolation add a subtitle emotional layer to the experience. Another emotional theme present is the concept of adaptation and change. Characters in an abstract sense are placed in situations where they must respond to shifting circumstances and unfamiliar environment. This reflects a broader human experience, the need to adjust when forced with the unexpected. The emotional tension arises from the uncertainty of these situations, as well as the challenges of maintaining identity and purpose in the face of constant change. It suggests that resilience is not just about strength, but about flexibility and the ability to navigate uncertainty. The film also touches on the theme of legacy, which operates both ethically and emotionally. Legacy is presented as something that extends beyond individual existence, influencing future generations and shaping the present. This introduces a sense of continuity where the past is not disconnected from the present but actively involved in it. The emotional weight of legacy lies in its preeminence, action, and decisions are not easily erased, and their effect can persist over time. This theme reinforces the idea that individuals are part of a larger historical and cultural framework. From a cultural standpoint, the film explores themes related to the mythology and historical identity. By drawing inspiration from Chinese cultural element, it incorporates a different mythological perspective compared to earlier entries in the mummy. This introduced themes of cultural richness and diversity, as well as the idea that stories of power, immorality, and consequence are universal but expressed through different traditions. The use of mythological imagery and symbolism reflect a broader cultural narrative where legends serve as a way to communicate moral and philosophical ideas across generations. However, this culture exploration also raised subtitle question about representation and interpretation. When stories drawn from specific culture tradition, they must balance authenticity with accessibility for a global audience. This creates an underlying tension between preserving cultural depth and adopting it for mainstream entertainment. While the film embraces visual and thematic elements from its cultural inspiration, it also simplifies them to fit with the structure of a blockbuster format. This reflects a broader theme in global cinema, the blending of culture specificity with universal storytelling. Another significant theme is the contrast between preeminence and impreeminence, the desire to create something lasting, whether power, influence, or identity clashes with the reality that change is inevitable. This tension reinforces the idea that attempts to resist cultural natural cycle often lead to imbalance. The theme suggests that accepting impermanence may be a more sustainable path than trying to overcome it entirely. The philosophical perspective aligns with many traditional mythologies, where the cycle of rise and fall is an essential part of existence. Finally, the film explored the theme of balance, which tie together is ethical, emotional, and cultural elements. Balance is presenting not as a static state but as something that must be constantly maintained. It exists between power and restraint, action and consequence, past and present. The disruption of this balance creates tension while its restoration provides resolution. These ideas serve as a unifying thread connecting the film's various thematic layers into a cohesive conceptual framework. The film engages with a range of themes that extend beyond its surface level action through ethical question about power and responsibility, emotional arc related to connection and adaptation, and cultural topic rooted in mythology and representation. The film presents a multifaceted exploration of human experience. While these themes are delivered within a spectral driven format, they reflect enduring ideas that continue to resonate across different storytelling traditions. When examining how the films connect emotionally with its viewer, it becomes clear that the film relies less on deep emotional introspection and more on creating an immediate experience driven connection. The emotional engagement is built through mood, thematic familiarity, and the overall viewing experience rather than through complex psychological depth. Starting with mood, the film establishes a consistently energetic and adventurous tone that encourages viewer to feel excitement rather than reflection. This mood is carefully constructed to keep the audience mentally and emotionally active. Instead of inviting viewers to slow down and process emotion in a subtitled way, the film creates a sense of constant movement. This has a direct emotional effect. It generates adrenaline, anticipation, and a feeling of being carried along by the experience. The viewer is not asked to deeply analyze what they are feeling. Instead, they are encouraged to react instinctively, feeling tension during intense moment and relief during lighter ones. This approach to mood creates a form of emotional accessibility because the emotions are immediate and easy to grasp. The films become approachable to a wide audience. Viewers do not need to invent significant effort to connect with the experience. The emotional response, excitement, curiosity, and suspense are universal and require little context. This simplicity is intentional, allowing the film to function as a form of escapism where the audience can engage without emotional heaviness. Moving to theme, the emotional connection is strengthened through familiar ideas that resonate on a broad level. Themes such as ambition, balance, and the consequence of power are not presenting in a deeply philosophical manner, but they are recognizable enough to create a sense of underlying meaning. Viewers may not consciously analyze these themes, but they still influence how the film feels. For example, the idea of confronting forces beyond control taps into a common human experience, the feeling of facing something overwhelming. This creates a subtitle emotional link as audience can relate to the tension even in a fantastical context. Another important thematic element is the idea of unity and cooperation. While not explored in a deeply emotional way, the presence of collaboration as a recurring concept creates a sense of reassurance. It suggests that challenge, no matter how large, are more manageable when faced together. This idea contributes to a feeling of comfort and stability within the otherwise intense and fast paced environment. The emotional impact here is gentle but effective, providing a counterbalance to the film's more chaotic element. This film also connects emotionally through the viewer experience itself, particularly in how it is structured. The pacing play a crucial role in shaping this experience by maintaining a rapid and continuous flow. The film minimizes moment of emotional detachment. The audience is rarely given the opportunity to disengage, which helps sustain a constant level of involvement. This creates a sense of immersion where viewers feel as though they are the part of the ongoing momentum rather than passive observers. This same pacing can limit the depth of emotional connection for some viewers because the film prioritizes movement and spectacle. It does not depend much time developing No's emotional layer. As a result, the connection it creates is often short term and surface level. The emotion felt during the viewing experience, excitement, tension, and amusement are stored in the moment but may not linger long after the film ends. This does not diminish their effectiveness, rather, it defines the type of emotional experience the film is aiming to provide. Another aspect of emotional connection comes from familiarity, especially for those who recognize the mummy. Familiar tone, stylistic choice, and genre convention create a sense of comfort. This familiarity allows viewers to quickly align themselves with the film's emotional rhythm. They know what kind of experience to expect, which reduces uncertainty and enhance engagement. The emotional connection here is based on recognition rather than discovery. Additionally, the film use of scale and spectacle contribute to a feeling of awe. Large, visually impressive moments are designed to evoke a sense of wonder, even if briefly. This emotional response is not deeply personal, but it is impactful in a sensory way. It appealed to the viewer's imagination, creating moments where the sheer size and intensity of the visuals become the primary source of emotional engagement. At the same time, the film avoided exploring heavier emotional territories such as profound loss, moral ambiguity, or deep internal conflict. This keeps the emotional tone relatively light and accessible, but it also means that viewers seeking a more profound or lasting connection may find the experience somewhat limited. The film chose consistency over complexity, ensuring that its emotional tone remain aligned with its entertainment focused goal. The film connects emotionally with viewers through a combination of energetic mood, familiar theme, and an immersive viewing experience. It prioritizes immediate emotional response, excitement, tension, and enjoyment over deeper lasting impact. While this approach may not create strong emotional depth, it succeeds in delivering a consistent and engaging experience that resonates in the moment. The connection it forms is driven by momentum and accessibility, making it effective for audience seeking entertainment rather than introspection. In this film, the character framework is built around recognizable archetype rather than deeply layered psychological portrait. This approach aligns with the film's action adventure identity, where character function as energetic anchor for the spectator rather than as subject of intense emotional exploration. From a reviewer perspective, the characters are effective in maintaining tone and momentum, even if they do not always evolve beyond their established role. Starting with the very most important character, the central figure can be understood as the classic adventurer archetype. This character embodies confidence, resilience, and a sense of grounded partiality. This personality trait here involve around courage, quick thinking, and a somewhat informed, approachable demeanor. There is a deliberate lack of complexity in this portrayal, which work in the film's favor. The character is designed to be instantly recognizable and easy to connect with, allow the audience to engage without needing extensive emotional investment. This archetype represents stability within the chaos of the film's environment, acting as a consistent point of reference. Alongside this figure as a complementary intellectual or refined archetype, representing a different kind of strength. The character brings a sense of sophistication, curiosity, emotional awareness. The personality traits lean toward intelligence, adaptability, and measured approach to challenge. While not deeply explored, this archetype adds balance to the central dynamic, suggesting that problem solving is not purely physical but also intellectual. The contrast between these two primary personalities create a subtitle interplay action versus thought, instant versus analysis, without requiring explicit development. A notable addition to the character structure is the next generation archetype, often portrayed as younger, more impulsive, and eager to prove capability. This character type introduces energy and a sense of progression, symbolizing continuity within the broader framework of the mummy. The personality trait here include curiosity, ambition, and a desire for independence. From a reviewer standpoint, this archetype serves as both a narrative bridge and a reflection of evolving audience demographic. It attempts to connect with younger viewers while maintaining ties to established dynamic. Turning to the antagonistic archetype, the film presents a figure defined by authority, ambition, and an overwhelming desire for control. This character is less about emotional relatability and more about symbolic presence. The personality trait emphasizes dominance, intensity, and a rigid sense of purpose. Unlike more nosed antagonists, this archetype does not invite empathy or moral ambiguity. Instead, it functions as a clear embodiment of excess power taken beyond acceptable limit. From a critical perspective, this simplicity aligns with the film's methodological tone but limits the depth of engagement. The antagonist is impactful in scale and presence but not in emotional complexity. Sporting these primary roles are characters that fit into mentor and guide archetype, offering wisdom, cultural insight, or strategic perspective. These figures often carry an air of calm authority, contrasting with the urgency of the main characters. Their personality traits include composure, knowledge, and a sense of purpose tied to larger ideas rather than immediate action. They contribute to the film's thematic structure by reinforcing the importance of understanding and balance, even if their role remains functionally supportive. Another layer with the character's design is the use of comic relief elements, which are essential to maintaining tonal balance. These character or traits introduce humor, lightness, and relatability. Their personalities are often marked by exaggeration, spontaneity, or playful interaction. From a reviewer's viewpoint, this aspect is crucial in preventing the film from becoming overly intense or monotonous. However, the humor tends to be straightforward rather than layered, serving more as a tonal reset than as a meaningful extension of character depth. What stands out is the overall character analysis. The film relies on familiarity and accessibility. The characters are not intended to challenge the viewer's expectation but to fulfill them. Each archetype is clearly defined, making it easy for audience to understand rules and relationship without confusion. This clarity supports the film pacing and ensure that character dynamics do not slow down the narrative flow. However, this approach also introduces limitations. The lack of deeper psychological exploration means that the character rarely transcend their archetype. Emotional growth, internal conflict, and nose motivation are present only in a minimal sense. For reviewers seeking complex character studies, this may feel underwhelmed. Yet, for an action driven film, this simplicity can be seen as a deliberate choice, prioritizing clarity and momentum over depth. In conclusion, the character structure of the film is defined by its use of well established archetype and clear personality trait. The character main provides stability and relatability while supporting role add balance, contrast, and occasional humor. The antagonist serves as a symbolic counterforce rather than a deeply explored individual. From a reviewer perspective, the characters succeed in supporting the film's tone and pacing, even if they may remain with the boundaries of traditional archetypal storytelling. In this film, the acting performance play a crucial role in shaping the film's emotional tone, even within a production that leans heavily on spectacle and visual effects. While the film does not demand deeply layered performance, it relies on the cast to bring energy, personality, and a sense of cohesion to an otherwise fast paced and effects driven environment. Focusing first on the lead actor, Branson Fraser deliver a performance that is consistent with the tones audience associate with the franchise. His presence carry a natural sense of ease and humility, which become essential in grounding the film emotionally. His performance is not about intensity or complexity, but about accessibility. He brings a kind of relaxed confidence that allow viewers to connect without effort. His expression and delivery often reflect a balance between seriousness and light-heartedness, maintaining the adventurous spirit that defines the film's overall mood. There is a subtitle warmth in his performance that help keep the experience engaging even when the surrounding elements becomes larger than life. In contrast, Maria Bello offer a different emotional texture, stepping into a role that carries expectation from previous portrait. Her performances lean toward a more composed and refined presence. Emotionally, she brings a sense of control and elegance, which control with the more rugged energy of the lead counterpart. While her portrait may feel less playful when compared to the earlier interpretations within the mummy, it introduces a slightly more serious tone. This shift can create a mixed emotional response for viewers. Some may appreciate the grounded approach, while others may feel a disconnect from the lighter dynamic they expect. Looking at the supporting cast, Jet Li deliver a performance that is more physical and symbolic than emotionally expressive. His role lies heavily on presence and intensity rather than dialogue or subtitle emotional cues. There is a control, almost restrained quality to his performance which align with the character larger than life nature. Emotionally, this creates a sense of distance rather than connection. The performance is effective in establishing a strong, commanding presence, but it does not aim to evoke empathy or relatability. Instead, it contributes to the film's atmosphere of scale and power. On the other hand, Michael Yeoh brings a more nuanced emotional layer to the film. Her performance carries a sense of calm strength and quiet authority, which stands out amid the high energy tone of the movie. She conveys emotion with subtlety using controlled expression and mere delivery to create a sense of depth. This adds a layer of emotional credibility that complement the more exaggerated element of the film. Her presence feels grounded and purposeful, offering a contrast to the more overtly dramatic performance around her. The chemistry between the cast members is an important aspect of the film's emotional effectiveness. Between the lead actor, there is a sense of familiarity that helps maintain continuity even if the dynamics feel slightly altered. The interaction carries an underlying ease, suggesting a shared history, though it may not always reach the same level of natural flow as in earlier installments. Emotionally, this chemistry provides a foundation that keeps the film from feeling disconnected even when other elements shift in tone. The interplay among the broader cast contribute to a sense of ensemble energy rather than deeply personal relationship. The chemistry is functional, it supports the pacing and keep the interaction engaging, but it does not aim for profound emotional resonance. Instead, it reinforces the film focus on momentum and accessibility. Moments of light, humor, and casual interaction help create a relaxed atmosphere, providing the film from becoming overly intense or rigid. Overall, the acting performance in the film are best understood as a part of a large cinematic experience rather than standalone showcases of emotional depth. The cast succeed in delivering performance that align with the film's tone, energetic, accessible, and visually driven. While the emotional range may be limited compared to more character-focused film, the performance effectively supports the film's goal of providing an engaging and entertaining experience. The emotional strength of the acting lies in its ability to maintain balance. The lead actor brings familiarity and charm. The supporting cast add presence and subtitle and overall chemistry ensure that the film remains cohesive. Together, these elements create an emotional experience that is consistent with the film's identity, light, engaging, and driven by the joy of adventure rather than deep introspection. When evaluating realism and character depth in the film, it becomes clear that the films operate within a stylized framework where realism is not the primary goal. Instead, it prioritizes accessibility, momentum, and visual spectacle. As a result, both character development and emotional complexity are shaped by the demand of the action adventure genre rather than by a committed to grounded life-like portrayal. Starting with character development, the film presents characters who are largely defined by their role and archetypes rather than by evolving inner journeys. The personalities are established quickly and remain consistent throughout, which support the film's fast pacing. This approach allows viewers to immediately understand each character is, but it also limits the opportunity for deeper transformation. Growth, when present, tend to be subtitle and functional rather than profound. The focus is less on how characters change internally and more on how they contribute to the overall experience. This approach to development is not unusual for films within the tummy, where the emphasis has traditionally been on adventure and entertainment. However, compared to a more character driven narrative, the depth here feels intentionally restrained. The film does not spend significant time exploring internal conflicts, personal dilemmas, or layer motivation. Instead, it maintains a clear and straightforward presentation, ensuring that character arcs do not slow down the pacing or distract from the larger spectacle. In terms of believability, the films exist in a heightened reality where realism is secondary to imagination. The characters are placed in a world grounded by fantasy elements, which naturally reduce the expectation of strict realism. Within this context, believability is achieved not through accuracy or realism, but through consistency. As long as the character behave in ways that align with the film's internal logic, they feel acceptable within that world. That said, emotional believability is more valuable. Some performances and interaction may need to create a sense of authenticity, particularly in moments of casual dialogue or lighter exchange. These instances provide glimpses of relatability, allowing the audience to connect on a basic level. However, the overall emotional tone does not aim for deep realism. Their reactions and responses are often simplified, focusing on clarity rather than complexity. This can make the characters feel more like representations of ideas or roles rather than fully realized individuals. The film's realism on spectral also influences its emotional range because much of the focus is on action and visual intensity. The emotional spectrum remains mm, relatively narrow. The dominant feeling are excitement, tension, and occasional humor. These emotions are effective in maintaining engagement, but they do not extend into more nuanced territories such as introspection, vulnerability, or moral ambiguity. The film does not attempt to explore the full range of human emotion. Instead, it concentrates on those that align with its energetic tone. This limited emotional range contributes to a viewing experience that is immediate but not deeply affecting. The audience may feel engaged and entertained in the moment, but the emotional impact is unlikely to linger. The film does not encourage viewers to reflect on characters' inner lives or to form strong emotional attachment. Instead, it offers a surface level connection that supports the pace and style of the narrative. Another factor affecting realism and depth is the film's tone consistency. By maintaining a balance between seriousness and lightness, the films avoid becoming overly intense or emotionally heavy. This consistency helps create a cohesive experience, but it also means that the emotional extremes are rarely explored. Moments that could potentially carry deeper weight are often balanced with lighter elements, keeping the overall tone aligned with the film's entertainment focused goal. From a reviewer perspective, this approach can be seen as both a strength and a limitation. On one hand, the lack of heavy realism allows the film to fully embrace its adventurous and fantastical identity. It does not burden itself with the need to justify every action or emotion in realistic terms. On the other hand, this same choice prevents the character from achieving significant depth. They remain engaging but not deeply compelling, memorable more of their roles than for their inner complexity. Ultimately, the film presents a version of realism that is shaped by genre expectation rather than by real world accuracy. Its characters are believable within the context of its stylized world, but they do not aim to reflect the intricacies of real human behavior. The focus remains on clarity, consistency, and accessibility, ensuring that the film delivers on entertainment experience without requiring deep emotional investment. The film approach to realism and depth reflected its priorities. Character development is functional rather than transformative. Believability is rooted in internal consistency rather than realism. And emotional range is focused on immediate engagement rather than lasting impact. This creates a viewing experience that is enjoyable and accessible, but ultimately limited in its depth and realism. The production budget of the film reflects its positioning as a mid to high tier blockbuster within the late 2000s film industry. Estimates generally place the cost in the range of $140 million to $150 million, a figure that align with expectations for large scale action adventure films of that period. This level of investment signals a deliberate attempt to maintain the franchise thematic scale while adapting to evolve industry standards, particularly in visual effect and global market appeal. Looking at cost range, the budget sits comfortably below the most expensive production of its time, but remains significantly higher than average studio films. This positioning suggests a calculated balance, high enough to deliver spectacle and compete with major releases, but controlled enough to manage financial risk. By 2008, blockbuster filmmaking had entered an era where budget exceeding $100 million were increasingly common, especially for sequel and established franchise. Within this context, the film budget can be seen as both competitive and strategically moderate. A closer examination of resource allocation revolve how the budget was distributed across key production areas. A substantial portion was dedicated to visual effect and post production, reflecting the film's reliance on computer generated imagery. The creation of large scale digital environment, supernatural element, and complex action sequence require extensive technical resources. During this period, advancement in CGI were rapidly transforming the industry, but they also came with high cost. As a result, visual effects became one of the dominant expenditures, shaping both the film's aesthetic and its financial structure. Another major area of spending was set design and production design. The film's shift in setting required the development of new visual environment, including elaborate interior and stylized landscape. Even when digital enhancements were used, physical sets and props remain essential for creating a convincing on-screen world. This combination of practical and digital design increased overall cost as both elements had to be carefully integrated. Locations and logistics also contributed to the budget. Filming across multiple locations, along with the associated travel, equipment, transport, and coordination, added to the production expensive. Large scale films often involve complex logistical planning, and this film was no exception. Managing these operations required both time and financial resources, further influencing the overall cost. The cast and the talent represented another component of the budget, though not the largest. Returning across such as Burden, Fraser provided continuity, while the inclusion of internationally recognized patrons like Jet Li and Michael Yu supported the film's global appeal. These casting choices reflect a strategic allocation of resources aimed at expanding the film's reach across different markets without allowing talent costs to dominate the budget. When compared to the similar film, the budget appeared consistent with industry trend. For example, The Mummy Return had a lower budget estimated at around 90 to $100 million, highlighting both inflation and the increasing reliance on digital effect over time. Meanwhile, contemporary releases such as Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull operated with budget closer to $100 million, indicating a high level of financial commitment for certain legacy franchises. In this comparison, the film occupies a middle ground, ambitious but not at the very top of the budget spectrum. This positioning suggests that the producer aimed to sustain the franchise scale without escalating costs to the highest tier of blockbuster spending. It reflects a cautious approach, balancing the desire for visual spectacle with the need for financial viability. The allocation of resources toward effect design and international appeal indicates a focus on broad audience engagement rather than niche storytelling. The production budget of the film demonstrates a major investment strategy with an estimated cost range of $140 to $150 million. The film allocated significant resources to visual effect, production design, and global casting while maintaining a level of financial control. Compared to the similar film of its era, it stands as a solid example of a mid to high budget filmmaking designed to deliver spectacle and reach while the audience without exceeding the upper tier of blockbuster expenditure. When examining the dominant box office performance of the film, the focus typically fall on the North America market, primarily the United States and Canada. Within this region, the film earned approximately 100 to 105 million dollar, a figure that provides useful insight into both audience reception and broader industry trend at the time. From a regional perspective, North America has traditionally been a key indicator of a film's immediate commercial impact. For this installment, the opening was relatively strong, reflecting the continued recognition of the Mummy brand. Established franchises often benefit from built in audience awareness, and this film was no exception. However, while the initial turnout suggests solid interest, the overall domestic total indicate that momentum did not sustain at the highest level typically expected from a major sequel. Looking at audience trend, several factors help explain this performance. By 2008, audience performance within the action adventure genre were shifting. Viewers were becoming more accustomed to highly polished visual effects and increasingly demanding in terms of storytelling and character engagement. While the film delivered on spectacle, audience responses suggested that spectacle alone was no longer significant sufficient to guarantee long-term box office strength. Word of mouth and repeat viewing play a crucial role in domestic success, and the film's moderate total suggests a more mixed reception in these areas. Another important trend involved franchise fatigue. By the time a series reached its third installment, maintaining the same level of enthusiasm can be challenging. Audience often compare new entries to earlier films and expectation become more defined. In this case, familiarity with the tone and style of previous installment may have influenced how viewers responded. Some audience members likely approached the film with a sense of nostalgia, while others may have been more critical looking for innovation or a refresh approach. When placed in comparison with a similar film, the domestic box office performance appeared moderate rather than exceptional, benefiting for the instances. The Mummy returned on significantly more in North America, benefiting from strong momentum, allowing the success of the original with the same franchise, suggesting that the audience enthusiasm had softened over time. In contrast, other action adventure films released around the same period, such as Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, achieved much higher domestic total. These films often leverage stronger nostalgia appeal or broader cross-sectional interest, allowing them to outperform competitors within the same genre. By comparison, the films occupies a middle position, successful enough to demonstrate audience interest but not strong enough to dominate the domestic market. It is also worth noting that the domestic performance must be viewed in relation to the film's production budget. With an estimated cost of around 140 to 150 million dollars, a domestic total of just $100 million suggests that the film relied heavily on international market to achieve overall profitability. This reflects a broader industry shift during the late 2000s, where global box office earnings became increasingly important. Studios began to design films with international appeal in mind, recognizing that domestic revenue alone was no longer the sole measure of success. From an analytical standpoint, the domestic box office performance can be interpreted as stable but not peak level. The film maintained enough audience interest to perform respectably, but it did not reach the same height as earlier entries or top competitors. This outcome reflects a combination of factors including evolving audience expectations, franchise majority, and increased competition within the blockbuster landscape. The domestic box office earnings of the film demonstrate a balanced but restrained performance. Within the North America region, the film benefited from brand recognition and initial audience curiosity but faced challenges in sustaining long-term momentum. Compared to both its predecessor and similar film of its era, it stands as a moderate success, indicative of a franchise that remains relevant yet no longer at the forefront of domestic box office dominance. When analyzing the international box office performance of the film, it became evident that the film's global earnings play a crucial role in its overall commercial standing. Outside North America, the film generated approximately $300 million or more, significantly surpassing its total domestic total and highlighting the importance of international market in sustaining large-scale production. From a regional perspective, the film performed particularly well across Asia, Europe, and parts of Latin America. Among these, Asian markets, equally, especially China, were of notable importance. The film's culture setting and visual themes were strategically aligned to appeal to audience in this region. While Hollywood films have historically performed well internationally, this film demonstrates a more deliberate effort to connect with specific regional audience through its aesthetic and casting choices. This suggests an early example of studios tailoring blockbuster content to expand their reach beyond traditional Western market. In terms of market reception, international audience generally responded more positively compared to domestic viewers. One key factor is that global audience often place a higher value on visual effects and large-scale entertainment. The film emphasis on action, effect, and expensive setting align well with these preferences. In many international markets, the expectation for blockbuster film is centered on entertainment value rather than narrative complexity, allowing the film to perform strongly even if critical reception was mixed. Another contributing factor is the relative strength of franchise recognition. The broader appeal of the mummies help attract audience who are already familiar with the brand regardless of language or cultural differences. Established franchise often benefit from global recognition, and this film leverage that advantage effectively. Even in market where earlier films were not dominant, the recognizable title and genre help draw attention. The film marketing impact also play a significant role in its international success. Promotional campaign emphasize the film's scale, visual effect, and global appeal. Trailers and advertisement focus on action and spectacle rather than dialogue heavy content, making them more accessible to non-English speaking audience. Additionally, the inclusion of internationally recognized actors such as Jet Li and Michael Yeoh enhance its visibility in Asian market. Casting decisions like these often function as both creative and marketing strategy, strengthening a film's presence in specific region. Another important aspect of international performances is timing and release strategy. By stringing release date and aligning them with local market conditions, studios can maximize audience turnout. The film's rollout was structured to maintain momentum across different regions, ensuring sustained visibility over time. This approach reflects a broader industry trend where international box office planning is as strategic as domestic release scheduling. When compared to the similar film, the international earning of the film stand out as a key strength. For instance, while its domestic performance was moderate, its global total placed it in line with a successful action adventure film of the period. Compared to the Mummy Return, the international market had grown significantly by 2008, allowing later film to generate a larger share of revenue abroad. Likewise, major releases such as Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull also demonstrate strong international appeal, reinforcing the trend that global audiences were becoming increasingly central to blockbuster success. From an analytical standpoint, the film's international performance highlight a shift in the film industry toward global dependency. Studios were no longer relying primarily on domestic market to recoup larger budget. Instead, they designed film with international accessibility in mind, prioritizing visual storytelling, universal theme, and globally recognizable talent. The international box office success of the film Empire and underscore the effectiveness as a globally oriented production. Strong regional performance, particularly in Asia, positive reception to its visual style, and strategic marketing also contribute to its substantial earning abroad. While its domestic results were moderate, its international success ultimately reinforced its position as a commercially viable blockbuster in an increasingly globalized film market. When evaluating the financial performances of the film, the discussion naturally centered on its worldwide gross and the point at which it reaches break-even. These two elements provide a clearer picture of whether the film was commercially successful when all the factors are considered. In terms of worldwide gross, the film earned approximately 400 to 405 million dollars globally. This figure combined both domestic and international box office revenue, with a significant portion coming from overseas market. The global total reflect the film's ability to attract a wide global audience, particularly in region where large-scale action and fantasy films tend to perform strongly. As seen with many entries in the film, international market play a dominant role in shaping overall financial outcomes. However, gross revenue alone does not determine profitability. To understand why the film truly succeeds financially, it is necessary to consider break-even analysis, which include not only the production budget but also the additional cost associated with releasing the film. The estimated production budget of the film falls in the range of 140 to 150 million dollar. But this is only part of the total investment, distribution, and marketing cost, often referred to as PA, can add a substantial amount, sometimes reaching 80 to 100 million dollars or more for a film of this scale. These expenses include global advertising campaign, promotional material, media placement, and the cost of distributing the films across different markets. When these factors are combined, the total expenditure for the film may approach 220 to 250 million dollars higher. This leads to an important consideration. Studios do not receive the full box office revenue. A significant portion of the ticket sale goes to theater, the studios typically retaining around 50 to 55% of domestic earning and a slightly lower percentage from international market. This means that the film's effective revenue from its $400 million gross would be considerably less when adjusting for these splits. Based on industry standard, a film generally need to earn around 2 to 2.5 times its production budget to reach break-even. In this case, that threshold would likely fall between $300 million and $375 million, depending on the exact marketing and distribution cost. With a worldwide gross slightly above $400 million, the film appeared to have cleared its break-even point through not by a wide margin. Beyond theoretical earning, it is also important to consider additional revenue streaming. These include home media sale, television rights, and a digital distribution platform. In 2008, home media was still a significant source of both theoretical revenue, often contributed a substantial portion of a film's overall profitability. Merchandise and licensing opportunities, while less central for this film compared to some franchises, also add incremental value. The role of the global audience is particularly important in this analysis. The film's strong international performance, compensated for its more moderate domestic result, demonstrated how global market can influence the financial outcome by appealing to diverse audience and leveraging international distribution. The film was able to achieve a level of commercial stability that might not have been possible through domestic earning alone. From a financial perspective, the film can be categorized as a moderate commercial success. It generated enough revenue to cover its costs and produce additional income, but it did not reach the level of profitability associated with top tier blockbuster hits. This distinction is important as it reflects both the opportunities and limitation of high budget filmmaking within a competitive global market. The worldwide gross of the film demonstrates the importance of combining domestic and international performance in evaluating success. After accounting for production, distribution, and marketing costs, the film appeared to have reached its break-even point and achieved a reasonable level of profitability. Financial outcome highlight the growing reliance on global audience and diversified revenue stream in sustaining large-scale cinematic production. A profitability assessment of the films require looking beyond its headline box office figure and examining how revenue compared to the total cost, including production, marketing, and distribution. On the surface, the film's worldwide gross of roughly $400 million suggests solid commercial performance. However, deeper analysis reveal a more moderate financial outcome. Starting with revenue versus cost, the film production budget is generally estimated in the range of $140 to $150 million. To this, one must add marketing and distribution expenses, which for a global release of this scale could reasonably fall between $80 to $100 million. This brings the total investment to approximately $220 to $250 million. Importantly, studios do not retain the full box office revenue. After theater split, the studio share is typically around 50 to 55% domestically and 40 to 45% internationally. Given the film's heavy reliance on overseas earning, the effective return from the global box office would likely fall closer to $180 to $200 million. This calculation suggests that theoretical revenue alone may not have brought the films close to break-even, but not significantly beyond it. In other words, based purely on box office return, the film appeared to have reached across achieve cost recovery with limited surplus rather than generated large profits. Profitability in the film's industry is rarely determined by theoretical earning alone. A key factor is ancillary income, which include some entertainment, sales, television licensing, and streaming rights, and the other post-theatrical revenue stream. At the same time of the film release, the home media market, particularly DVD, was still a major contribution to studio income. Films was strong brand recognition, such as franchise entries in The Mummy, often perform well in this secondary market. It was reasonable to assume that The Mummy film generated tens of millions of dollars through its channel, significantly improving its overall financial position. Additional revenue may have come from international broadcasting deals and long-term licensing agreements, which extended a film's earning potential over several years. While these streams are less visible than box office numbers, they play a crucial role in turning marginal theoretical results into sustainable profits. When considering ROI, the film likely fall into moderate range. It does not appear to have delivered the high margin return associated with major blockbuster successes, where profits significantly exceed total cost. Instead, its ROI reflect a more conservative outcome, positive but not exceptional. The film recouped its investment and generated additional revenue, but the margin between cost and profit was relatively narrow compared to top performing film of its era. Comparatively, earlier entries in the franchise, such as The Mummy Returns, benefited from stronger domestic performance and at the time lower production cost. This allowed for a more favorable ROI. By contrast, the third installments faced higher expenses and a more effective global market, which limited its profitability despite solid overall earning. From an industry perspective, the film can be categorized as a financially viable but not highly lucrative project. It demonstrated the ability of an established franchise to generate consistent revenue, particularly in international market, but it also highlighted the increasing cost associated with maintaining blockbuster scale. The balance between rising production expenses and audience expectation become evident in the scales. In conclusion, the film was likely profitable because its profitability was moderate rather than substantial. Theoretical earning bracket close to break even while ancillary income stream pushing into positive territory. Its ROI reflects a stable but not outstanding financial performance, illustrating both the strength and limitation of mid to high budget franchise filmmaking in a globalized market. Audience reaction to this film was generally mixed, while responses varies noticeably across different demographics. Younger viewers and casual moviegoers tended to respond more positively, largely because the film delivered fast-paced entertainment and visually engaging moments. This group typically prioritizes excitement and spectacle, and for them, the movie provided an enjoyable cinematic experience without requiring deeper analysis. In contrast, older audience and long-time fan of the Mummy show more divided reaction. Many of these viewers came in with established expectation based on earlier films, particularly regarding tone and style. As a result, their feedback often reflected comparison, with some experiencing satisfaction in the continuation of the franchise, while others felt disconnected from what they had previously enjoyed. This difference highlights how familiarity with the series can shape perception. Looking at viewers' feedback, a common thing was appreciation for the film's scale and visual presentation. Audience frequently noted that high energy pacing and large set pieces strengthen, especially in a theatrical setting. However, feedback also pointed out that the experience felt more surface level with less emotional engagement that some viewers expected. This suggests that while the films succeed in delivering immediate entertainment, it did not resonate equally on a deeper level for all audience. In terms of engagement, the movie performed well as a short-term viewing experience. It captured attention during its runtime and providing a sense of excitement, particularly for those seeking light escapist entertainment. However, its long-term engagement, such as repeat viewing or strong word of mouth, appear more limited compared to higher rated entries in the genre. Overall, audience reaction reflect a clear divide. Those seeking spectacle and easy entertainment were largely satisfied, while viewers expecting stronger emotional or stylistic continuity expressed more mixed opinion. The box office performance of the film play a significant role in shaping how the film is perceived, both critically and within the broader industry. Financial results often influence whether a film is viewed as a success or disappointment or something in between, regardless of its creative qualities. In terms of critical reception, the film moderate box office earning reinforces mixed reviews when a high budget production perform at an average level rather than exceeding expectations. Critics and audience alike tend to interpret this as a sign that the film did not fully resonate. Strong box office result can sometimes offset negative views, but in this case, the balanced financial outcome aligned with the perception of the film as competent yet remarkable. This creates a feedback loop where financial performance and critical opinions support each other. From a studio's reputation perspective, the film performance reflects cushion success rather than a major achievement. For a franchise associated with the Mummy, expectations were relatively high, while the film demonstrated that the brand still had global appeal, particularly in international markets. Its inability to dominate the domestic box office suggests limit to its continued growth. Studios often use such results to evaluate the future of a franchise, and a moderate outcome can lead to more conservative decision regarding sequel or reboots. When viewed through genre comparison, the film performances place it in the middle tier of action adventure release of its time. Compared to high grossing competitors like Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, it appeared less impactful while still outperforming smaller or less established films. This positioning influenced perception by framing it as a solid but not standout entry within the genre. Overall, the box office outcome shapes the film's reputation as a commercially viable yet non-dominant blockbuster, reinforcing its image as an average performer rather than a defining success. From a reviewer standpoint, the film stands as a technically competent but uneven entry within modern action adventure cinema. Its cinematic quality is driven largely by pace and visual scale rather than narrative sophistication. The film maintains a consistent rhythm, rarely slow down, which make it engaging on a surface level. However, this same momentum limits opportunities for depth, resulting in an experience that feels more immediate than lasting. In terms of production value, the film is undeniably polished. The investment in visual effects, set design, and large scale staging is evident throughout. The environment feels expensive and ambitious, reflecting a clear intention to deliver spectacle. That said, the heavy reliance on CGI occasionally creates a sense of artificiality, reducing the tactile realism that often strengthens immersion. It is a visually impressive but not always visually convincing. Looking at performances, Brad and Fraser provide a steady and consistent presence and anchoring the films with a sense of continuity. The supporting cast, including Jet Li and Michael Yeoh, contribute effectively within the film's stylistic boundaries. While none of the performances aim for emotional depth, they align well with the tone, emphasizing clarity, energy over complexity. From a thematic perspective, the film engages with ideas of power, balance, and a consequence, but these themes remain largely at a conceptual level. This provides a framework rather than a focal point, supporting the action without demanding deeper exploration. The film's strength lies in its scale, accessibility, and entertainment value, while its weakness stems from limited emotional depth and an over-dependence on spectacle. It succeeds as a visually driven experience but falls short of achieving lasting cinematic impact. The film is best suited for viewers who enjoy high energy, visually driven entertainment and looking for an easy, engaging watch rather than a deeply emotional or thought provoking experience. In terms of audience type, this film appeals much to casual moviegoer families with older children and fans of large-scale adventure cinema. It works well for those who prefer films that focus on excitement, movement, and spectacle over subtitle storytelling. From a genre preferences perspective, this movie is ideal for fans of action, fantasy, and adventure hybrid. If you enjoy films that blend mythology with modern filmmaking, especially those that emphasize visual effect, fast pacing, and grand setting, you are likely to find this movie entertaining. Viewers who appreciate the style of the Mummy or the similar blockbuster franchise will feel comfortable with its tone and structure. The film delivers a consistent sense of momentum, making it a good choice for those who want a cinematic experience that is lively and visually engaging. In terms of age group, the movie is most appropriate for teenagers and adults. Young children may find the intensity or scale overwhelming, while the older viewer can better appreciate the balance between action and light humor. It is not overly complex, which make it accessible, but it still require a level of maturity to fully enjoy its pacing and atmosphere. The film may not be suitable for viewers who prefer fast-paced, character-driven stories or those seeking strong emotional depth. If you are drawn to film with integrated narrative, subtitle performances, or meaningful emotional arc, this movie may feel somewhat limited. Its focus is on immediate entertainment rather than lasting emotional impact. Overall, it is a solid choice for audience seeking fun, fast and visually impressive escapism, but less ideal for those looking for depth and introspection.